Addiction is a disease. It has been vastly studied for many years. I feel personally, though, out of all the aspects that's looked into addiction, there's a key factor that's overlooked. You see, through an individual's addiction journey, over time, they begin to burn bridges, right? Colleagues, members of a congregation, family, friends, spouses. Eventually, an individual struggling with an addiction will find themselves in a very deep hole. Now, as Christians, I do believe that you see not just addicts, but you see anyone struggling, and you have this calling to help. You wish to save the individual. However, what if I told you, and in Christians it's not your intent, but what if I told you the addict didn't see a Christian coming bearing a ladder? They saw someone that was going to come and look down, that was going to judge, that was going to speak from a place of better than. This could also then, we could say, puts a wall in between the Christian and the addict. And again, this tool, this ladder that was prepared by the Christian to save the addict actually became another brick to this wall. You see, I can speak to this as an individual in long-term recovery. I started struggling at a very young age, but from the outside looking in, it wasn't noticeable. Harmless, recreational, with friends, playing with drugs and alcohol. Now again, a psychiatrist would look at an individual such as myself. I was an athlete, I was a musician, I did well in school. So any therapist or psychologist would say, this kid's not going to struggle with an addiction issue. But they would be wrong, right? I'd find out many years later that even at the young age of 13 or 14, I was already feeling unconnected. I was already beginning to feel isolated. Struggled mentally much more than the average teenager. So drugs and alcohol, even at that age, would mean far more to me than the average kid. Addiction did begin to consume my life. Eventually, all of those characteristics that I had began to dwindle away. I was expelled from high school, riddled with more guilt and shame. I began breaking the law to fuel an addiction issue. I found myself in jail. Now, throughout my addiction, there were Christian friends. They came to yank me away from my people, places, and things. They wanted to bring me to their churches, their small groups. They refused to sit with me, but they wanted to rescue me. In jail, waiting on a sentence, there was a Christian who used the power that a pastor has to get through certain limitations in jail. He was able to bring me a Bible. And while waiting again on a multiple year sentence, we read scripture together. To him, this added comfort. To me, this made me wonder, if I had read more scripture, would I be in jail right now? I began to feel more so what was wrong with me. Eventually sentenced, I found myself in prison. Even then, there was a pastor who was able to get in. And I have a lot of respect for this pastor, as he had a mission, he had a goal to be able to lay eyes on me, to report back to my mom that your son is healthy, he is alive, I saw him today. But I can look you guys in the eyes and tell you, I can't remember a single word that pastor told me. That conversation meant nothing to me. I do remember sitting, because he was able to bring me back to an office, a warden's office. So I remember after years of stainless steel that my butt cheeks very much enjoyed the chair I was able to sit on during that conversation. It was comfortable. But not a word he said meant anything to me, because there was an absence of trust, of connection. There was no bond. A lot of people hear my story and they say prisons were Hollan changed, and they're wrong. That was where I was the most isolated. Upon release, Christians did come in. They were ready to save. They were ready to rescue me. And even then, there was a Christian who wanted me to follow his way. He had found a way to honor God and to show his gratitude for his freedom. But the very moment that I did not show as much interest in this nonprofit, he began to separate. He stopped calling. So again, there are often situations, and I can give you a specific one now. I remember my very close Christian friends praying over me. And I had just gotten out of prison. To me, I was free. But now they're praying over me, and I'm thinking to myself, am I dying of terminal cancer? Why are they praying over me? I just want to go run in a field, right? This was a pivotal point where I began feeling so much judgment and so much shame, even what I was causing my family, that I began to completely isolate from the world. I began drinking daily, and I became a raging alcoholic. Now, at the age of 25, there is not a friend, not a family member, not even a Christian, but there was a gentleman who was a lawyer. He was my attorney. And he said, Hollan, I advise you to go to a treatment center. I did not get sober because I wanted to. I did not rush to Asheville with aspirations of being the man you guys see today. I ran to Asheville because I knew there were warrants for my arrest, and my attorney said they cannot confirm or deny if you're in a treatment center. That's why I went to Asheville, to hide from the law. Upon arriving in Asheville, though, I immediately felt a sense of peace. I felt comfort. I didn't feel judged, and I was accepted. And for once, after many years, I almost felt like I was home. I spent the last 5 years working in the field, working my way up into positions where now I find myself as an admissions director fielding hundreds of thousands of phone calls with individuals just like me, their families, their friends, their loved ones, helping navigate how they could find what I was able to find myself. And I've spent the last 5 years extremely fascinated because help in Asheville was so simple. Yet at the same time, frustrated. And to be quite frank, angered that it was so easy in Asheville, why did it take me so long to find? At a very young age, we are taught stranger danger. We're taught by our parents, by our guardians, do not trust a stranger. Don't talk to a stranger. Definitely do not get in a van with a stranger. So with that trait ingrained into us, again, I remember vividly a situation. I was very young, well before addiction was addiction, at an early age, and I could not stop smoking. And my dad said, Hollan, why can't you stop? And I remember looking at him and saying, I don't know. And if I can't explain to my own parents how I feel, my deepest, darkest emotions, how am I supposed to explain that to a stranger? Being a Christian does not exempt you from being a stranger. In Asheville, what they did was they allowed a bond, they allowed a safe space for me to find myself, and they observed from a distance. They didn't judge, they didn't question, they let me come to them when I was ready. And when I arrived in Asheville and I completed my intake, I remember a staff member saying two things. I'm proud you're here. Do you want a cigarette? And those were the two words that I needed to hear at that time. One, someone was proud of me, and I hadn't heard that in a very long time. Two, he established a bond by saying, I love nicotine too. Let's go smoke. It was that simple. As we learn to understand that, again, a lot of Christians fail to understand that, we've all seen that imagery of the addict in the hole and the Christian above with the ladder. But again, that doesn't mean that the addict even wants you to climb down in and hang out with them just yet. We have to relearn to approach addicts, and we have to relearn to let addicts approach us when they're ready. And let's say that happens. Now, the next great factor in this is, who are we even talking to? So I like to break addiction down into 3 stages, 1, 2, and 3. And before I break them down, I'll give you my own personal experience like this. Stage 1 was when I did not think I had a problem, but all my Christian friends kept trying to take me to Elevation Church. Step 2, I'd already felt extremely judged and dismissed by Christians, and that was when I was starting to run from myself and definitely had a problem. Stage 3 was when I was all by myself and the attorney said you should go to Asheville. And stage 3 was when Asheville found me. You see, in stage 1, there's really been no complications, no issues, no DUIs. There's been no medical concerns. Relationships are still solid. They're still actively employed. Even a professional like myself is going to fail to break through to someone in stage 1. Stage 2 is where I like to try to help, because I often explain to parents and individuals, you don't have to go through what I went through. Maybe we can catch you before you get there. And that's stage 2. Yes, there's been some legal issues, possibly some medical complications, probably a divorce or a breakup. That's where addiction is starting to really show its true colors. But sadly, in the world we still live in today, addicts don't find help until they reach stage 3. You see, the individual that was trying to help me in my early stages of addiction, they were incapable of hanging out with my friends because they were scared of my friends and they constantly wanted me to come with them. But if they're scared of my friends because of the unknown, why did they think that I was not going to be scared of their friends for the similar issue of the unknown? The Christian that came into church that wanted to read the Bible with me, what he showed me was that there was only one way to recover. And if I failed to wish to recover under his way, then I was going to fail. In his eyes, God was the only higher power. But what if I wanted a different higher power? Does that mean I can't recover from addiction? And the Christians after prison, who still wanted to be the rescuer, who still wanted to save me. But again, at the moment that I didn't have the similar interest in being saved as they did, they abandoned me too, because it didn't fit their agenda. Again, what Asheville did, what everyone else failed to do, was say, Hollan, we do not care who you are, who you wish to be. We're just simply glad you came. And I often like to explain to individuals, because there was an epiphany that happened early in my recovery. In the basement of a church on a weekday night, as we were all hidden from the world because the sun's gone down, I did feel more acceptance and love, more redemption and trust in the basement of a church than I ever did upstairs on a Sunday morning. And there was a problem there. A perfect example of Christians understanding that you might not be the direct contact to save a Christian, but that doesn't mean you can't help. This very own church itself, upon release from the treatment center, I was recommended to go to a sober house, surrounded with men that were just like me. Accountability, breathalyzers, drug tests, things that I needed. But I couldn't afford it. And there was too much guilt and shame to call my parents and ask for additional funds, but I knew I needed to stay in this house. So I called Kyle, the pastor of this church. And again, Kyle saw an opportunity where he himself was not going to save, but he could assist in helping. The Peak Church funded multiple months of my sober living so I could, in fact, stay in Asheville and stay successful. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't go to sober living. Let's say we build trust. Let's say a bond is formed. Connection is established. How are we talking to addicts? Again, as Christians, without you knowing, oftentimes you have a solution and your solution is the only solution. Failing to understand that you're talking down to an addict, not even intending to. But again, in Asheville, they weren't telling me what I needed to do. They weren't offering their suggestions. There was not a mandate that needed to be followed. They loved me for who I was. Even in my deepest, darkest days, I had sponsors that told me later on, I knew you were going to mess up, Hollan, but it wasn't my job to step in. It was your journey to learn, to see that you could crawl out of the mud yourself. And I was there to make sure you didn't drown in the mud, but I let you run into it because I knew that's what you needed at the time. Christians always desperately needed to save me. Asheville simply just wanted to love me for who I was. The easiest way I can explain what I found in Asheville when I drove up there that day is I found a family. I found a network of individuals just like me. Individuals that I could trust because I knew they'd gone through what I'd gone through and they'd made it out the other side. So there was inspiration. The seeing versus believing was real in addiction because I saw addicts who succeeded. The common saying of, this is a program of attraction versus promotion. I was attracted to the possibility that I could recover. They offered me a safe space. They offered me a hand. They believed in me before I could believe in myself. And in that family I found in Asheville, by loving myself and healing, I was able to heal and build my family back up in Apex, back home. Because without that family in Asheville, I'd never have a family back home. I'd constantly be isolated. I'd still be running from them. And so I hope, I do pray, possibly just maybe there might be a day where the Christian community, where just Christians in general can understand that maybe they could be that family for that addict. That maybe the Christian church could be the family for that family struggling. Thank you, guys.